Imagine a Japanese car so good, it went toe-to-toe with the European giants of its time and won. The Datsun 510 wasn't just affordable, it was a game changer. But how did a humble, budget-friendly sedan outshine BMW and Alfa Romeo on the American racing circuits? This is the story of the car that conquered America's heart, one corner at a time. When the Datsun 240Z first rolled into the US in the fall of 1969, many car enthusiasts were taken aback. A true sports car from Japan? That was a surprise. But the people who already knew Datsun were not in the least surprised at all this. It is worth mentioning that 2 years prior to the 240Z, Datsun had launched the 510 sedan, which revolutionized people's view on Japanese automobiles. Before the 510, thoughts about Japanese cars were that they were small, cheap, and built to be replaced. But this little sedan was not. It was well built, compact, and in many aspects, the Japanese response to BMW's Neue Klasse. Now, BMW and Nissan may not have much in common today, but in the 60s, Nissan was keeping a very close eye on BMW. Some may even say that they were stealing ideas. BMW was lost in tiny bubble cars such as the Isetta before they got it right with a Neue Klasse after the war. Models such as the 1602 and later the 2002 were perceived as sporty and light in comparison to their counterparts, big heavy American cars of the time. Nissan spotted an opportunity here. They aimed to provide American drivers with a taste of European driving dynamics, but at a fraction of the cost. In 1968, for about two-thirds of the price of a BMW, you could drive away in a sleek Japanese sedan that was both economical and surprisingly fun on twisty roads. The Datsun 510's secret sauce was simple. It was an affordable, lightweight, rear-wheel drive family car with fully independent suspension. This approach wasn't entirely new for Nissan. Similar to how the Mazda Miata later became an everyman's Lotus Elan, the 510 was built on a tried-and-true European engineering concept. Nissan had already learned a lot from European automakers like Austin and Mercedes-Benz, thanks in part to their partnerships. After World War II, Nissan even produced direct copies of Austin's A30 and A40 sedans. If you asked old parts managers from that era, they'd tell you that Nissan parts were often used for Austin cars because they were identical but built to a much higher standard. This collaboration laid the groundwork for Nissan's own 410 in 1964. The Datsun 410, designed by Pininfarina, still holds its charm even if it is a bit overshadowed by its more famous sibling, the 510. When it first hit the road, the 410 came with a modest 60-horsepower engine and shared many parts with the Datsun Roadster, also known as the Fair Lady. It had the potential for greatness, but just needed a little extra boost. That boost came when Nissan acquired the Prince Motor Company. If you've heard of the legendary Nissan Skyline, you've heard of Prince. This company brought a wealth of engineering talent to Nissan, especially their knack for studying Mercedes-Benz four-cylinder engines to ensure durability. One standout result of this partnership was the U20 engine. Prince engineers took a Mercedes-inspired single overhead cam head and paired it with a 1600cc Austin-derived block, expanding it to 2 liters. This engine went on to power Peter Brock's famous BRE Datsun Roadsters, cranking out up to 150 horsepower with twin Mikuni carburetors and a high-performance cam. While the 510 didn't get this level of power, Nissan used the lessons learned from the U20 to develop the engine for their new economy car. But before the 510 could truly take off, it needed the magic touch of one of Nissan's most daring figures, Yutaka Katayama, affectionately known as Mr. K. Mr. K is a legend among Datsun fans, and for good reason. He was bold, charismatic, and often clashed with Nissan's leaders. Early in his career, he pushed the idea of racing as a key marketing tool, a notion that didn't sit well with the company's heads. Despite winning a grueling endurance race around Australia in 1958, Mr. K was sent to the US, seemingly on a fool's errand, to build a dealer network. With a tiny budget, Mr. K first grew Nissan's presence in the US by selling small pickup trucks. But he knew the American market wanted more than just toy-like sedans. Having immersed himself in Southern California car culture, earning speeding tickets like a local, he knew exactly what would sell. Something roomy, light on its feet, and a lot like the BMW 1600 too, but at a price that wouldn't break the bank. As plans for the 510 started coming together, it became clear that just sending instructions over the phone wasn't going to cut it. Initially, the idea was to equip the 510 with a 1.3-liter overhead cam engine, more advanced than the pushrod engine in the 410, but still not enough for Mr. K. He knew that to truly compete with the BMW, the 510 needed a 1.6-liter engine. Headquarters, however, insisted that the best they could do was 1.4 liters. But Mr. K had a secret weapon on the board: Saiichi Matsumura, a newcomer who had joined Nissan from Japan's International Trade Organization. Matsumura was either impressed by Mr. K's arguments or simply understood overseas markets better. Either way, he agreed to put his name on a memo Mr. K had drafted, sneaking the 1.6-liter engine approval past the rest of the board. Everyone knew what was happening, but they gave a collective sigh and let it slide for the export models. The 510's design was the work of Teru Uchino, a rookie designer at Nissan. Unlike the Italian-influenced 410, Uchino gave the 510 a clean, straightforward look that established Datsun's unique styling language. The interior of the Datsun 510 was all about simplicity and function. It had a straightforward, no-frills design, but that was part of its charm. The seats were supportive, with enough bolstering to keep you in place during spirited drives. The dashboard was clean and uncluttered, featuring easy-to-read gauges that gave you just what you needed: speed, fuel, and engine vitals. Today, it can proudly sit next to a BMW 2002 and hold its own in terms of design. Around the same time, Nissan released the smaller Sunny sedan, so the 510 moved up a size. It grew by about 5 inches compared to the 410-411, weighing in at just over 2,000 pounds, depending on the body style. The 510 featured front disc brakes, McPherson struts up front, and trailing arms in the rear for a fully independent suspension. However, the station wagon version had a live axle to handle heavier loads. A 4-speed manual transmission came standard with an optional 3-speed automatic. Thanks to Mr. K's persistence, the 1.6-liter L16 engine sat under the hood, pumping out 97 horsepower. In some markets, a twin Hitachi carburetor setup pushed that figure closer to 110 horsepower. Mr. K's risk with the Datsun 510 definitely paid off. Datsun's U.S. sales soared in the late 60s, tripling in just 2 years. The 510 was priced at $1,996, making it a steal at just under $1 per pound. Comparable to a VW Beetle in terms of cost to buy and maintain, the 510 was nearly twice as fast and an absolute joy to drive through corners. And that was the stock version. Racers turned it into a true track performer. One of the 510's earliest fans was racing legend Bob Bondurant. When he started his racing school in 1968, his first pick was Porsche, but they turned him down. Mr. K stepped in and offered Datsun's support. Thanks to him, the school opened with 2 Datsun Roadsters, a 510, a Lola T70, and a Formula V. The 510 quickly proved itself as a fantastic teaching tool. It was friendly, predictable, and could take a beating. Qualities that made it not just fun on the road, but also perfect for the track. But Mr. K didn't want the 510 to be just a teaching car. He wanted it to compete. In 1971, Datsun made a big move into American racing with a dual strategy. Pete Brock's BRE team, with John Morton behind the wheel, represented the West Coast in the Trans Am 2.5 class. Meanwhile, on the East Coast, Datsun teamed up with Bob Sharp Racing. From the outset, the 510s were competitive. BMW and Alfa Romeo had dominated small-bore sedan racing in the U.S. But the 510 turned the tables. John Morton clinched the manufacturer's championship in 1971, and Bob Sharp took first place at the SCCA runoffs. By the end of the 70s, the racing grid was nearly an all-Datsun affair. The 510's giant killer status, along with rust and its racing legacy, has driven its prices up. The two-door sedan is the most coveted, with values jumping 85% over the past 5 years. Now worth around $30,600 for an excellent condition model. The station wagon has also surged, up 92% in 5 years, to an average of $22,100. The four-door, although trailing, still shows over a 50% increase to about $20,500. Gen X and younger buyers dominate the market, but their numbers have dipped slightly in recent years. Despite its popularity, 510s are rare at big auction houses, mostly appearing on platforms like Bring a Trailer, with some modified versions fetching over $50,000. It's a hefty price for what started as the poor man's BMW. But with its racing pedigree and timeless simplicity, the 510 remains a beloved classic.